started, I wanted to welcome everyone to the webinar tonight. For those of you who don't know me or forgot who I am, I'm Dr. Lauren Levine. Welcome as always. Again, we always have a great turnout for these webinars. We have close to 200 people registered. I think we have a really interesting topic tonight and an incredibly interesting speaker, which I'll introduce him in a minute or two. I hope that everyone's staying healthy and safe out there. As always, I commend you for being here this evening, continuing your dental education. As normal, I'm only going to speak for a couple of minutes. I want to make sure that Alastair can speak for as long as he needs. He also wanted to make sure that we leave time at the end for questions. Many of you have been on these webinars in the past, so you know the format. When we have hundreds of people on, we can't take verbal questions, but all of you have a GoToWebinar control panel on your screen. You can just type in your questions as you think about them. I won't normally interrupt the speaker until they're done. We do try to get to all the questions. I never know. Sometimes we get 3 questions. Sometimes we get 53 questions. We don't really have a hard stop as far as I'm aware, so ask your questions, and we'll probably get to all of them before we're done this evening. In the next few days, look for a couple of things. First off, this webinar, as with all the other webinars that I do, is being recorded. So if for some reason you can't stay to the end, you get distracted, don't worry about it. You will get a link to the recording. It might be coming from me. It might be coming from Alastair. Either way, usually that gets out within a couple of days. We are also providing CE credits. As of about 2 weeks ago, I was finally, after a long process, certified to provide AGD PACE CE credits. So that will go out. I will be sending that out. That normally, I might get it out tonight, it might be tomorrow, but usually I can get it out pretty quickly. There's literally nothing you need to do other than just show up, enjoy the webinar, and log out when you're done. There's no registration or quiz or test or anything like that. You have to have been here for half of the webinar live. If you are listening to this for the first time as a recording, unfortunately, I have no way of tracking that. So we're only able to provide the CE credits for live attendees. But as long as you logged in, and I know occasionally we get people who call into the webinar, but they don't click the link that was unique to them. Everyone has the same phone number, so there's really no way for me to know if you had logged in. So you were sent a unique link. You have to click on that link to show you as being logged in. And plus, it's a PowerPoint. I mean, it'd be like watching a movie with your eyes closed. You really need to be watching this. So with that out of the day, so you know, I have a lot of friends, and they're very varied in their experiences and in their life history. And sometimes I'll joke around and say, hey, you know, you're really a Renaissance man. Our speaker today is the truest definition of a Renaissance man. That's Alastair Macdonald. He is an accomplished entrepreneur with an unusually diverse background. He was formerly a safari guide, an African expedition leader, a TEDx speaker, a global investment manager, and a veterinary hospital owner, that's quite a list there. He brings over 3 decades of diverse experience to the room. Today, he's an owner in a multi-location dental practice, a private advisor, and founder of the Sovereign Dentist Group and the Sovereign Dentist and Sovereign Guide podcasts. He's also the chairman of Chingata Wildlife, which protects elephants across West and Central Africa. He's a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and a proud father of his 2 kids. So, Alastair, we're thrilled to have you here. Looking forward to the presentation, and take it away.
Thank you so much, Lauren. You're a gentleman and a host par excellence. I'm delighted to be here, and I'm going to scare your audience with temporarily with my own video, or maybe not, just to at least show my face. It looks like that won't work, but we'll press on. Just wanted to put a head to the voice. Can be an unusual
So
voice.
yeah, so what's happened out there is that you actually turned off your screen sharing, so I don't know if you still have the panel there. If not, I can put it back on for you.
There we go. All right, definitely.
There we go, all good.
All right, we're back in business. I was tempted just to at least poke my head in, but and say hello, but maybe that would be too disruptive. There we go. I exist. But I'll disappear for now. Let's get back to what it is to speak about. Uh, as Lauren said, my journey to now has been a meandering one. I have been started my first business at age 18. I'm originally from Zimbabwe in Africa, and my entrepreneurial journey began at 18. It was in the safari and expedition world, but very quickly led me through into the investment world, to the United States, and so forth. I worked my way into the healthcare space originally through the doorway of the veterinary industry, and built up and sold a veterinary hospital, while later on and simultaneously getting increasingly involved in the world of dentistry over a decade ago now, initially working with certain individuals of some kind of prominence who had hired me as an advisor to them, seeking what I suppose we could call a cross-pollinated perspective. These are individuals that understand that no one industry could ever have itself figured out. Anyone here who's familiar with Kurt von Gödel's incompleteness theorem knows that any closed system can never truly know itself. And so my arrival into dentistry came from business, as opposed to most docs that I know and support and partnered with came to business from dentistry. So my perspective is a different one. I have been, as Lorne said, in multiple different industries, different economies. I've lived through the greatest asset deflation in the world, the global financial crisis, an extremely profitable time for me, and also the greatest hyperinflation in history, back in my homeland of Zimbabwe, where change was the rule. To give you an idea of what that looked like, I the hyperinflation reached 231 million% a year. And those of us that had employees had to pay them twice in a day, because what you paid them at lunchtime wouldn't buy them dinner that night. So I have seen every possible iteration of economic, market, political, and social cycles, but I also have been in 7 different businesses I've owned in 5 different industries with 9 different partners. So with all of that said, in all of these industries and my over a decade in dentistry as a practice owner and advisor to others, I have never seen an industry so plagued with bad partnerships as dentistry is. It just strikes me as one broken model after the other. And the problem with kind of siloed industries, which of course all aspects of the healthcare world can become, is they become kind of self-referential, and individuals end up building a partnership model really from a template that they got on a Facebook community page or something like that. There's just remarkably bad results. I've seen numbers varying from 50 to 80% of dental practice partnerships unraveling. That's even worse than the statistics on marriage in the United States. And yet we find ourselves in this conundrum where whether you are, there's essentially 4 channels that we can find ourselves needing a partner. If you are, say, looking to capitalize on growth opportunities that you have, but you know that everything you know is channeled through your own hands, and you feel the only way to bring in a high qualified associate is to offer them equity, to capitalize on the growth that maybe your marketplace is bringing to you. The second is a sense of trying to plan our exits, where we think, I want to sell some now, find somebody that can, over time, take over this practice that I've spent, the bulk of my adult life driving. Of course, the other is docs that are concerned about maybe a DSO exit. Maybe the great, beautiful, shiny DSO promise on the hill may not come to pass. And even if it does, anybody that knows dental exits with DSOs, I know them intricately. Outside of my own sale to private equity in 2021, I have advised on over 325 million in dentist exits in the last 3.5 years. I'm not a broker. I will never take a brokerage fee for that. I consider it excessively earned income for a very modest and poorly done job. My own opinion. But I'm very familiar with it. So if that's one of the channels individuals are considering, we know that the contemporary DSO exit inevitably leads to a partnership. More often than not, a 60-40 partnership, where in the service of reducing your risk and starting to phase out your transition, you end up giving 60% of your lifeblood and asset toil, building this asset through your own toil and blood, to a majority owner in another state that does not hear the front desk trip over a terrible line on the phone while you are hands-on with the patient. So in any one of these angles, throughout any one of these channels, we all find ourselves coming to some version of a partnership. The associate we don't want to lose, the associate we want to attract because of growth, our phased transition out, or our partnership with the DSO. Some version of these, they all ultimately lead toward partnership. And yet they're done so badly. I believe that I have a beautiful solution that has worked tremendously for me and my current partners, as well as those that I've advised in the past. But let's talk about why it is that most of us are so hesitant, or why we're so concerned about the first steps in a partnership. I identify them as these two fears. The first fear is, of course, the wrong person. This person that we're going to place our clinical standards in the hand of, our culture. Do they have the same work ethic? Do they care? Are they only driven by clinical outcomes or financial incentives? Can I trust them with my reputation? This thing that I've spent 20 years building can be destroyed in one bad patient experience. This is a legitimate concern, picking the wrong person. The other is equally as common, which is the wrong deal, building a structure or mimicking the structures that are so pervasive in dentistry, with a number of shortfalls and so forth that we're going to cover as we go forward here. Do we give them equity? Should we give them profit share? How can I incentivize them? Does equity lead to ownership behavior? All of these things. Unfortunately, these fears tend to freeze us like a deer in the headlight. And we say, well, I don't have it figured out, so I'm going to do nothing. Of course, the choice to do nothing is as much a choice as any other. And every no is 1,000 yeses, and every yes is 1,000 no's. This is a problematic set. And no matter what happens over the course of our hour together, I'm going to share with you specific reasons why these fears of yours are legitimate, and what you would do well to consider in building your own version of what I call a full cycle partnership, or the sovereign partner. A union of two sovereign high agency individuals whose ambitions and skill sets are harnessed, mutually harnessed, for the collective gain. That's what I intend. At the end of what I share here, principles and concepts for you, I am going to share with you that I have a cadre of docs that I will be walking through in the next several weeks to build their own sovereign partnership, something that takes all of this into account. You can choose to join us or not. Either way, the concepts that I am going to share with you and the principles will be portable to you immediately, as well as some tools that I'll leave you with. You get to choose whatever feels best for you. If I can, branch away for a moment and share, by metaphor, a true story. As a young man in Zimbabwe, I was oftentimes hired by individuals in remote villages of my homeland to come in and eliminate what were called PAC, or problem animal control. These would have been leopards that were eating livestock, to scare away the elephant that are destroying crops in villages and so forth. And I would do this when I wasn't leading expeditions. I've done expeditions for National Geographic, for Smithsonian Institute, film crews and so forth. But this was work that I would do that I would largely consider community service. One day, I found myself called out to an area of southeastern Zimbabwe called Gonorezu, very rugged climate, very remote area. And I was brought in because a hyena had been terrorizing a local village and had in fact killed and thoroughly gorged themselves on two women. It was terrible. And I did what I do, come in and set up my camp and check out the area, look at the tracks, speak with the villagers. How long has this been going on? I had a whole protocol that I would bring to this. But it wasn't until the first day that I got onto the fresh tracks of this very large, old female hyena that had been terrorizing these villages. And I had a bit of an epiphany. And believe me, this is connected to you. You are me, if you can play along for a moment. As I stepped out of my vehicle and put on my gear and was about to set off tracking this old hyena, I had a horrific realization, which is that I had hunted hyenas before, but they had eaten livestock. Though I had had a lot of experience, I had never hunted a hyena that had successfully hunted humans. Same animal, completely different risk profile. I'll leave you there, no need to end how that story goes. What has this got to do with us? You may have found or have the perfect associate, the perfect thing that you're familiar with, the incentives, the way that you speak with them and meet with them, they fit your culture and so forth. But the moment you go to engage with that person as an equal or even subordinate partner in your business, this is a completely different hyena, a very different risk profile for you and your business. What I'm going to walk you through are some of the reasons that we are afraid, why we should be, and what to do instead. So let's start by speaking about the wrong person. This is probably one of the most common things. I love them. We went to school together. They've worked for me for a couple of years. I think of this the same way I do when I want to say, replace somebody at the front desk. And I find this, my own docs in my community and mastermind do as well. They say, we've got somebody, we're missing someone at the front desk and we just can't find good help. I know what we're going to do. What about Auntie Pat? Auntie Pat has known me since I was a little kid. She loves me. I love her. She trusts me. We've known each other my whole life. She's the one, everybody loves her. I'm going to offer the job to Auntie Pat. This is extremely common, and I refer to it as qualification by proximity. Auntie Pat, it is lost on me in this moment of my practice ownership that in all the years that I've owned this practice and all the ads I've put out for my front desk, never once has Auntie Pat submitted her resume to my position. Qualification by proximity is not qualification at all. What I listed about Auntie Pat were qualities. They were not qualifications. This is a major trap for all of us practice owners. We go to the same church. We went to the same school. Our spouses are friends. I met them through the kids. Wonderful. These are not qualifications. I'll say this a little more strenuously. To the extent that you are proud of the practice that you have built, then it follows that whoever is going to be qualified to partner with you needs to be an above average, extremely qualified individual. Certainly, if they're going to continue your legacy, protect your culture, your revenue, your overhead, etc. Qualifications and qualities are not the same thing. Let's move on. Here's one of my favorites. My biggest producer is obviously who I should make a partner. Friends, I'm here to tell you that this is one of the biggest mistakes you could make. Is it always a mistake? No. Is it one of the biggest mistakes you could make? Absolutely. I'm going to leave you here with a principle I invite you to investigate. This principle is called the paradox of merit. Many of the times over the course of our hour together, and to the extent that any of us share a working journey going forward, you will hear me reference concepts from game theory routinely. People respond to incentive systems. The paradox of merit is what perils this particular contributor. This high-performing producer is locked into your practice as a load-bearing wall. The kickoff of our call, I mentioned the different reasons we might partner with somebody, and I overlooked perhaps one of the most common, which is the idea that I need somebody to help carry the burden of responsibility that weighs on me as an owner. If this is you, which in my experience is probably 3 out of 4 docs, looking for help with the responsibilities of ownership, not clinical production. With absolute respect, we can hire somebody to run and work and produce good clinical production in our practice. But you cannot hire somebody to run your practice with the same level of investment that you have. The paradox of merit is that this individual is pulled into a world where they are rewarded for very short-term benefits. This is the associate, and I have, for example, in my private community, I have one of my docs that has two associates that are producing between 240 to 250,000 a month every single month. He's so good at producing these, he travels around the country and teaches other docs how to do the same. Moving those docs from a clinically oriented producer in the practice to a partner is to remove a load-bearing wall. I'll use a simple bit of math. If any of these associates were, say, working 4 days a week, you are looking for a break with the practice, you need help, and they're producing 200,000 a month, and they're doing it 4 days a week. I know mathematically that if that person is forced to give up 1 day of clinical work to help me with practice ownership, managing the team, balancing the P&L, watching supply purchases, whatever it is, that is going to cost me $50,000 a month in lost production. Do you know how exceptional somebody needs to be at doing Facebook ads or running payroll or buying supplies for them to for us to forego $600,000 in production every month? This is the paradox of merit. This is what is called in behavioral game theory delta zero thinking. Delta zero is somebody that is oriented toward an immediate benefit. Delta one, if you own a practice, is you. You have a delta one mindset. Delta one mindset is somebody who, again, using the math of game theory, assigns an equal value to tomorrow's dollar as they do today. This is somebody playing the long game. When you move an individual from a short-term, quick effort, quick benefit world, you are asking them to change their entire trained response and incentive system. This is called Delta 1 and Delta 0. This is a critical piece of the work that we'll do going forward. Let's move on. Contribution versus reward. This person is the biggest contributor. Therefore, they should get X%. Now, don't get me wrong. There are many associates that feel this way too. They say, hey, I'm a doc just like you are. Why don't I want to own 50%? And they say 50% because they think that gives them equal authority. Authority must match responsibility. How could they possibly take over responsibilities for a vertical in the practice, for a domain that they have never run before? They will be learning on your dime. Now, that's okay, and I have a solution. We'll get to it. But contribution must match reward. When I take this same associate doing 200,000 and I say, no problem, I'll make you an owner, I'll give you, 30%, whatever the case might be, I am going to, you're being compensated for your clinical production, keep doing what you're doing, but I'm also going to pay you your 20% share of the profits. What this means is that you will be paid twice for the same job. You keep doing what you're doing as a high-level clinician, and I will pay you accordingly on 30% of production, whatever your deal is, plus an additional 20% simply because I don't want you to leave. We have to ask ourselves, how fair is it to me as a partner? How fair is it to the practice that you should be, or anybody should be paid twice for the same job? Why does this matter? Because these conversations that we avoid become extremely expensive and dangerous over time. What I'm getting at is the associate in the circumstance, or even at 70,000, it doesn't matter, the math works out the same way, is that if these conversations don't happen soon, they metastasize. And that typically shows up as seeds of resentment cast over time. Next thing you know, you've lost your patience and you find yourself calling me and asking me for help to unwind the practice, the agreement. Unfortunately, I feel like I get one of these calls every week, pulling the bodies out of the river of bad deals with bad incentives. And that's the reason that I am going public with this offer that I currently teach only to my current doctors. I think this makes a difference, and we need to get in front of it. Rewarding production with pay, and we reserve equity for enterprise value. Enterprise value. Just so you know, I had this experience myself. Dr. Tammy, we'll call her Tammy because her parents did. So Dr. Tammy was my clinical director. I am not a dentist. I currently own multiple practices with my partners. We own a hub and spoke day practice and emergency overnight and weekend facilities. But in a previous life, I had a larger practice with 6 docs full time, big 8,000 square foot facility. Dr. Tammy was my lead clinician. She was my chief medical director. I needed her in that role, and she was compensated for it because I am unqualified and unable to support the types of clinical standards that are required. I need expertise. And Dr. Tammy came to me and said, listen, I would like to be, I want to be a partner. I said, wonderful. I would like that too. But on what basis would we do this? How is it that we could possibly, what is it that you feel like you could add on the other side of the business? Pause there for a second. Clinical ownership has 2 channels. One is, of course, clinical production in your hands, the hygienists and your associates. The other is the professional channel. What is this? Only everything. This is hiring and firing, team huddles, processes, systems, scripts, debt management, expansion, contraction, supplies, new equipment, blah, blah, blah. That is the mountain of work that causes the bulk of what I refer to as entrepreneurial brain damage. So as I coming back to Tammy and I say, what of these components could you add? What would qualify you? Now I'm using different language just to convey this peer-to-peer here. What is it that you would do? And she says, well, I'm, the highest producing doc. I do the most medicine out there. That's absolutely true. She says, well, I do great medicine. I said, well, with absolute respect, of course, I have 5 other docs out there right now that all do incredibly good clinical work as well. Something has to be different for us to truly be able to add value to each other. Hers is reflected in her paycheck, mine in the profitability of the practice. I'll pause here for a moment and give you the high-speed answers to the test. This was an incentive design problem. She thought that she wanted equity ownership when really what she wanted was more money. I'll give you this. This is absolute unlock for those of you that have associates or multiple practices. Here is the solution. If you are truly trying to incentivize someone for anything, it must account for growth. Something has to grow. What I did was to build a structure for Dr. Tammy using just standard industry math. I explained it here, and saying, right now, I could pay you 35% instead of 30. But instead, what I'm going to do is we're going to look at the rolling average of the last year's work that the docs are doing. Again, this is a financial metric. I have many others. I just use these because they're easier, more familiar. By no means are clinical standards ever subordinated to financial incentives in my businesses, ever. So just disclaimer, but I'm using this for simple math. I said to her, instead of that, we will establish and identify the baseline average floor of our associates on the team. Your job is to create an accelerated mentorship, and I will pay you on the growth in their revenue, their complexity of cases, their suite of skills that they have, the breadth of offerings of different modalities that they can provide over and above whatever that floor is. What is the short version? If you are trying to incentivize someone on your team, incentivize them according to the growth of those they teach. That changes everything. There's lots more, but I'll move on. Here's a novel idea. A contract will protect you. This idea that we signed something, that means we're aligned and protected. I can tell you that in a business partnership, if you have to reach for a contract, you are already lost. You are already lost. This is the structural breakdown in dental partnership design. A contract is a snapshot in time. What we are doing is saying, taking everything that we know, we believe, we understand, our ambitions, skills, resources, experience, current team members, interest rates, market valuations of practices, modalities that we can offer, and so forth, treatments, and we are locking them in time. We're freezing them in a calcified agreement called a partnership contract. Yet every single one of those components we know will change over time. They will change. None of these things will be the same. How is a calcified, ossified old contract going to serve us in a future where DSO valuations completely distort the industry, where we start to see DSOs unraveling, where we start to see a shift in the demographics of who are becoming docs, etc. Interest rates moving. Those will always change valuations. What I'm getting at is the true business partnership is built for dynamism. The world is a dynamic place. Human networks are ecosystems, and they require dynamic allowances in your agreement to account for and incentivize growth. The agreement must reflect that. Capabilities versus incentive. You have someone on your team right now who is really capable, but you just can't seem to get them off the proverbial couch. Or they can do this, but I don't know why they don't. They don't because capabilities mean nothing without the right incentive system. You probably know somebody, maybe you have someone in your family that has an incredible skill set, and maybe they're a musician, maybe they're an artist, maybe they're a physics genius, whatever it might be, that they just don't ever use. You say, why not? You could be great. Because humans respond to incentive systems, and capabilities and incentives operate on different axes. Our job is to design the incentive system that keeps abreast of their development and the changes in the world. Here's another. This person's been with me the longest, so I should reward them with ownership. If you were to walk into the DMV, what we're saying here is time equals value. If somebody has been around, therefore they are more valuable. I invite you to imagine in your mind taking a trip to the DMV. And you go to the DMV, and as you walk up to the counter, there is Jack. Jack has been there for 20 years. And right next to him is Jane. You dealt with Jack last week. Something happened. You had to go home. You came back. And this time you dealt with Jane. Jane has only been there for 2 years. In your lived experience, is Jack 10 times more valuable than Jane purely because of time? Absolutely not. It's worth remembering that while it's true that it's endearing on some occasions, in some senses, some scenarios, it's endearing to have somebody who sticks around for a long time. But we overlook the fact that it is oftentimes, as often, simply because somebody is in a situation where they are getting away with something. They love the cost-benefit analysis of where they're at. Put another way, and not quite, I don't mean to be cold about this, but from a game theory perspective, loyalty is nothing more than an aligned incentive system that lasts longer than most. An aligned incentive system that lasts longer than most. One of the things we saw during COVID when the world was unraveling is bidding wars breaking out for different team members, not the least of which were hygienists, and individuals thinking that they could retain team members simply by paying them more. If you have to buy loyalty, it's not loyalty. The other is the new hire. This is, by the way, how you're going to scare off the potential unicorn, the potential great partner that in their interview asks about partnership. Don't ever say, we'll discuss this at some point, because you will weed out the best potential candidates. We discuss it at some point. What is the associate's fear? The associates have two fears as well. Their fears are that they will be strung along as an associate for the next several years before you finally change your mind and decide to sell to a DSO. Ask me how many times I've seen this. Ask me how many younger docs I've heard suffer this. I had a conversation last week with now an owner in his previous, what made him an owner. He started his own practice because he was strung along for 5 years with all sorts of promises of revenue share and someday. Why do we do this? We do this because we don't have a system, and we're afraid of inviting the wrong character, the untested person. We're also afraid of the other original fear, having a bad deal. What this does is it signals low trust. It signals lack of vision, lack of conviction, and lack of the leadership that we really want to communicate in these powerful moments. One of the biggest mistakes, versions of this, is we'll talk about it in 3 years or something like that. Is it really time that is going to make someone qualified? Or is it an active, deliberate mentorship toward professional and clinical qualification that you seek. You don't fear a partner. You fear an unqualified partner, and you should. What does this mean? Our job is to create a crystal clear path, a blueprint of the specific, measurable inputs and, most importantly, outcomes that would qualify somebody to begin to take over domains of the practice, to take on aspects of the business, to accelerate its collective growth. Incentives own, and in order for someone to qualify as an incentive, it must create growth. Not just growth in the individual, growth in the structure, the systems, the protocols, the capabilities of the team, and so forth. What am I getting at? When I am asked this by what I would refer to as baby docs or new docs that are just emerging from school, I say absolutely. And I can show you exactly what it would take to earn equity in this practice. Here is one of the most dangerous fallacies. Selling part of the practice to an associate to reduce your risk. I'm going to sell 30%, I'll take chips off the table, and I will be safer. Maybe, but it is also true that you've gone all in on a rookie. You have, it's not just that you've turned 30% of an illiquid asset into cash in your account, which maybe feels good, but you have also reinvested 30% of your life's work into an unknown, untested, unqualified, inexperienced person. Now, this doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. It just means you shouldn't do it without a strict, measurable mentorship structure that not just induces the right behavior, but induces it with ambition. The most valuable practices are not those where equity is given away. Here is language that I have heard too many times from a particular influencer in our industry. Just give them 10%, 5%, just to get them hooked in. Hooked in. Imagine that you're dating and you go out on a first date and you meet the person over dinner and it's going wonderfully, and 20 minutes in you say, hey, I know we don't know each other yet, but I'm just going to go ahead and here's this ring I happen to have brought. Let's get engaged and just see how it goes. I just don't want to lose you to anybody else. It's not a partnership. That's a hostage negotiation. And whoever that offer is made to should run for the hills, because you are signaling the worst thing in any negotiation. You are signaling need and fear. Need and fear. In any negotiation, it is the person with the most need that always loses. You are either the prisoner or the prize. And how you approach and negotiate this conversation with your associates will reveal your decision. Another critical piece. There is a sense that by giving 10% in this made-up example, which is common, I will stop them from leaving. Maybe, but what you have done is in fact something from the world of finance, a world I lived in for a very long time. You have placed a hedge on your practice. You have decided to take 10% of your asset, let's call your business, your portfolio, and you have hedged it against departure. Coming back to that rock star associate, you don't want them to leave. You don't want to lose the production. I'm going, again, hard on measurable things here about production and revenue, not because it's what drives me, but it's most measurable, so much easier for us to speak to in a dynamic like this than we could about specific margins and clinical outcomes. By placing a hedge on my asset, yes, I have limited the downside. This person might not leave. It'd be harder for them to leave. But I've also placed a limit on the upside. That's what hedges do. If I earn $1 million worth of NVIDIA stock and I'm worried about it falling, the same, you see the analogy here, I don't want it to fall by 20 or 30%. I don't want to lose this associate and lose 20 to 30% of my production. I place a hedge on my portfolio. The difference is in finance, as a hedge is placed for a brief period of time. It is because I am concerned about, in this example, NVIDIA's potential future for the next few months or the next earnings reporting period or something like that. What I'm getting at is I am placing a temporary hedge to protect a temporary risk. When you give 5-10% of your equity to a partner so they don't leave, you are doing the opposite. We know that their departure would be tumultuous. It would be a pain in the keister, but it would be temporary. So what you have done is you have placed a permanent price on a temporary benefit. You have avoided a temporary pain with a permanent cost. There's got to be a better way. More often than not, we assume that others want what we want. You have probably by now, your friends or family have decided to make an offer to an associate that, here, this is what we've got. It's so wonderful. You can be an owner and look at how great it is. You look at me and so, it's worked out great for me. You should do the same. This is, of course, a projection. It may or may not be true, but it is definitely a projection. We tend to create and lead with incentives that would work on us. Is it true? Is it true that this new doc that's just emerged really wants equity? I would suggest that it's unlikely. After all, what they're really struggling with is that they're recently married and wanting to buy their first home, but they are burdened with student debt to the tune of $450,000. Is it really equity that they need, or is it more income? They think that being an owner always means more income. If you own a practice, you know that this is a fallacy. In fact, there are times in our journey as practice owners where we have to put money back into the business to cover payroll. If this hasn't happened to you, I'm sorry to hear that, because there are lessons that we learn with those experiences that are immeasurably valuable. Is it true that all they want is just equity? Do they realize that equity is worthless unless you are selling or borrowing against it? Is somebody who wants to come out of school wanting to get equity to then turn around and borrow against it? I doubt it. However, this is a math problem, and I'll show you exactly how to solve it. With this is what I call the delta slider. It's a calculator that will be available to everybody. We'll send it out by email. This is a side-by-side comparison of everything that you're wondering. How much equity? Should I give them dollars? Should I give them increased percentage of production? How much equity? At what price? Versus compared to what, etc. You'll see here that what we've got is everything that you could choose to put in from your practice. Gross practice revenue, the associate's revenue, your percentage of overhead, how many days a week they are in the chair, etc., etc. And you can do a side-by-side comparison where this calculator will actually show you that at 30% equity, the associate is better off on the partner path. You can see the break-even points, etc. This calculator gets even more in-depth when we start to see what it means to our income. The annual income for, you see the first bar chart there, staying as they are, adjusting their production at certain thresholds, or of course giving them equity. Again, these numbers are just plugged in. They're there for you to mess with. This delta slider will unlock incredible insights for you about the particular associate you're looking at and the type of deal that would best suit both of you. Because an agreement that is signed with any sort of resentment in either party, know that that resentment is only going to metastasize over time. Here's what I have for you, and we can open it up for questions. Starting on with a soft start, August 1st, I'm doing a 3-month, 90-day, 6-module, 12 weekly calls where I will show up live for as long as we need every week to walk docs through this model that I've built for myself and the docs that I serve. This covers some of the things we will speak about: partnership blueprints, red teaming your practice. If you're not familiar with that, you should be, or you would want to be. Behavioral mechanism design, the 4 gates conversation to select the right associate, screening them for qualities versus qualifications, building out the mentorship program that qualifies somebody to partner with you, and so forth. And then, of course, this delta slider, as well as a number of other interactive tools. The investment is $7,500, $2,500 a month for 3 months. You can leave at any time. You can leave at any time. If I'm not actively making a difference in your life, then I don't deserve to be invested in. I have no hesitation about the, excuse me, about the value of what I can deliver and that I've done for others. Of course, we've identified that qualifying the right person, designing the right deal, this is coming for all of us. Or we can stay where we are and we can delay and convince ourselves that these conversations will get easier in the future. that we will find the time at some point in our lives to suddenly develop the awareness, the tools, the ability to not create exactly the outcome everybody else does. This is how you can find me. This is the QR code. I'll leave it up there for a moment. Let me see. These are the individuals that I've worked with. You can go onto the various links on YouTube. Uh, these individuals that have come to me with the same thing. This particular lady, Dr. Michelle, is quite prominent. Some of you will know her from the industry, very large following, a significant practice, came to me with a practice that was apparently too big to sell. You can watch in her video, we built a beautiful partnership solution for her. The lady in the bottom right showed up with an unbelievably toxic partner, and we were able to help her get away from that. Just to really convey how ugly this was. This was a partner that they brought on, that a husband-wife couple that owned the practice. They brought on this associate. They made all the offers that everyone else would. Yeah, look at this. Here's equity. He was going to be a 1/3 owner. They did a owner carry for him, nothing out of pocket. And something changed suddenly. Within a month, he started canceling his production. He wasn't showing up to do work, and it got harder and harder. This was a parasite. They had designed an incentive system to protect a parasite. What was initially a benefit to him became an entitlement faster than the ink dried on the contract. It got to the point so quickly, it got to the point where it was so bad that he walked into a partnership meeting at the practice late one evening, put his feet on the table, and looked at these two unbelievably good humans. And he said, guys, here's the truth. I know you've been upset and complaining, but the way I see it is this. I'm basically the woman that the NBA player has gotten pregnant. And your job is to see to it that I continue to get checks until I say I'm done. They were absolutely pinned into a corner. And we figured it out. Unwinding that was one of my personal source of great personal pride, because I don't like bullies and I don't like parasites and I don't like creating them in partnerships. And I'd like to help you avoid the same. I will stop there. Lorne, over to you. You see if show that I actually do exist. I'm not sure which version of my head exists here, if you can even see me.
Yeah, well, we can see you and we can see your screen, so those are both
Okay.
good. So thank you. We do have some questions. I know a number of you may have hopped on a little bit after the opening introductions. So if you weren't here for that, number one, the webinar was recorded, and that recording usually will go out within a couple of days. It might be coming from me. It might be coming from Alastair. One of us is going to make sure that it goes out. Secondarily, if you were here for half of the webinar live, this doesn't apply to people who are watching this recorded because I have no way of tracking that. But if you were here for half the webinar live, you will be receiving an AGD PACE CE certificate for 1 hour. That should go out tonight. It might be tomorrow, but certainly within 24 hours, I will do my best. I would also encourage you, we only have about 4 or 5 questions so far, but this is a fantastic opportunity to ask your questions, and we'll get to those. So one of the questions, Alastair, is what can I do to retain an associate dentist without partnering?
It's a great question, because we're starting to widen the aperture of what's possible. One of the concepts that I teach is called the 4 avatars of dentistry. And what it really speaks to is the instincts and proclivities that different docs have. The core essence of it and the wisdom behind it being, when you identify a doc that is culturally and clinically and socially a good fit for you, identifying their avatar allows us to reverse engineer exactly the kind of environment that they would be out of their mind to leave. This is exactly what docs in my tribe have done. One of them, Dr. Christie, who's based in the Midwest, is a pediatric doc. She owns 5 practices and has 9 different associates. I was in conversation with her just several weeks ago and asking for an update. I said, oh, how's it going? I said, these 9 docs plus herself, 2 docs per practice. And I said, you know what? Anybody raising their hand with those sort of numbers, you'd expect someone to put their hand up and say, yeah, I'd like to be an owner. She said, not a person. I said, well, what's that about? And she says, well, I did exactly what you taught me. Identify the avatar. I built a team and system and ecosystem around them that is such that they would be foolish to leave. When you find, say, a clinical doc, and we can support them in all of the ways and the currencies that they really value, and give them an environment that they love, they have to ask themselves, do I want all of this and to have to show up at the practice on 4 a.m. to fix a burst pipe? There's a point of diminishing returns where, declining marginal utility, where this is great, I overdid it. And that's what we can do. So the 4 avatars of dentistry, in fact, could send this out. This is a training and a concept that works beautifully. I needed it as a non-clinician to identify these characters. That's a really beautiful solution, giving people what they want and taking away what they don't. Part of our work together will be identifying the 4 domains of incentives, things like status and leverage, time and energy, stress and risk, for example, then financial symmetry or asymmetry. When we design an incentive system, and this is something we all do, unless you're steeped in game theory, we tend to think about what to give somebody. Let's give them more money. Let's give them more of these complicated cases. But a huge part of the value is taking things away. Take them away from them. Do they really want to run the morning huddle? What can we do to lighten their load in any of these other 4 domains in a way that costs us very little relative to the equity we might give away, but more importantly, the authority, contribution and reward, responsibility and authority. When we give responsibilities to somebody, we have to give them the authority. So we want to make sure that we're doing this in a balanced way. So long answer, Lorne, but I seem to only have those.
Yeah, makes perfect sense, though. Okay, here's a question. Someone was mentioning that they have an associate that's starting in a couple of months. They already promised them equity, but just listening to your presentation, they're thinking that maybe that was a mistake. So if that was the case, and assuming that there's no actual written contract about this, what would be the best way to approach them?
So one of the concepts we'll cover is what I jokingly refer to as the benevolent rug pull, where we have to show up and change somebody's expectations. Now, I'm not sure how far along this doc is, but uh, I have no problem with this situation. This is not an issue at all. The issue is that of qualification. So yes, I'm all about it. Equity is great. I stand by it. Here's what's going to be required to get there. This is a critical distinction, because what most docs will do is, as I say, hey, give them 5% or give away equity, or my favorite, phantom equity. I will believe in phantom equity when I can pay employees with phantom paychecks. Until then, I think that it's a terrible term, and it speaks to it triggers low trust environments. It's unnecessary. There's better terms. I understand the point behind it, but there's better ways to do it. Uh, what we more often than not, what docs are trying to do is say, like, look, you can have equity and give something away, but then try to convince someone it's valuable. Well, good luck with that. Instead, this conversation is oriented toward, I want this for you, and in order for me to truly support the enterprise value, the cultural value, the clinical standards, everything I've worked so hard to build, you can own any practice down the road that you like. There's people that'll give equity away or phantom equity, or you could, go down the street and someone will give you a Kia. But here we're building Bentleys, meaning that in order for something to be valuable, it needs to be earned. And there's a very easy framework that I'll go through in great detail that gets this person to understand that they could own 5 cents of a hot dog stand down there, or they could own a world-class restaurant. Which equity do you truly want to own at the end of the day? The owners here go against themselves. They dilute the very value and qualification, and they end up years later wanting to bring in another partner who finds out that the last one, they had a seller, the seller carried the note, and they were given equity ownership after just a year, as if time is qualification, etc. And now we find ourselves with this double standard, where this unicorn that's just showed up at the practice is not yet qualified for equity, but they think they are because that other person got it years ago in just 6 months. So this is solvable. This person is not necessarily in a bad situation. They just get to do the favor of helping this person understand what true high value practice ownership looks like. If it's given away, it's not valuable. if it's earned, it's valuable. Our job is to qualify them and do it in such a way that they are ambitiously pursuing that qualification for themselves. Here's the last point on this, and I'll stop. This is what I refer to as a principle of truths that travel. To get to the level that you are at, that I am at, that all of our friends on this call are at, owning a high value practice, it has taken many, many years. I think for myself, just in the last 11 years, let's assume that this associate is smarter than I am. They may be better connected. They're more clinically qualified, that's for sure. But it's taken me 10 years to be at this level of sophistication, profitability, culture, whatever the case might be. They have that problem. So ignorance is expensive. My ignorance has cost me massively, and my job over time is to reduce that ignorance so that I can produce better results in less time. The point is, learning curves take time and they're expensive. This is a truth that travels. So this associate that's joining could choose to say, hey, I don't want this. I feel like it's not for me. I'm going to go and do it myself. Well, you could do that. It's taken me 10 years to get to this level. Let's say you're smarter than I am, and it could take you 5 of blood, sweat, tears, risk, going alone, late nights, stress, dislocation of family time. You could do all of that. And let's say you're a rock star, you could do it in 5. Or, and you'll earn that practice of 5-year maturity. Or you can go through this accelerated mentorship program that we'll structure together in the partnership work. And in 18 months, you will be here. What is that time worth to you? If you want to, if I'm in the time folding business. That's my job, is to fold time for the valuable candidates that have a combination of curiosity, gratitude, and work ethic. And those people, the world will be the path to their door. And we get to do that for them in exchange.
Okay. Here's an interesting question. What about equity for non-clinical people, like the office manager? Have you ever seen that with other clients? Is it something you would advise for or against?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, and it's not just self-serving, I think this signals a high integrity person. It's something that I've done. I'm not saying that because I just think it's a beautiful thing. It's a great signal of how someone sees their team. It is more often than not a great leadership team or individual that carries the freight for the true business's success, way more than a load-bearing wall of a particular associate over time. These individuals deserve to be recognized. In my own experience, I did this actually with a vet hospital that I built and sold many years ago, with what I refer to jokingly, her name was Alex, originally from Russia, and we would jokingly refer to as our Russian gangster because she could be like that. She could crack the whip. It was a term of endearment, but Alex had earned her way in. So it's worth saying, of course, state laws overwhelm our intentions here. Unless you have a management company, DSO structure, something like that, you could create conflicts where you have obviously a non-clinician owner. There's workarounds for this, of course, but I'm a big fan of that. We need to be very careful what we're incentivizing. Are we simply incentivizing revenue growth? Or we incentivize? I would recommend something that speaks to a combination of factors, the most important things: general revenue growth, overhead, and turnover. Turnover is an extremely important thing to measure. We can redline our teams and produce these beautiful numbers and end up with high turnover in a practice nobody wants to be a part of. So I'm a fan of creating these multi-dimensional KPIs that leads, OMs, and regionals and so forth are uniquely qualified to move the needle on. I'm a big fan.
Okay. What about, for young dentists? Is there metrics that they should be using as far as like when should they start to be thinking about partnerships or bringing in associates? Is there like a gold standard, a certain number of years, a certain amount of production, or is it just kind of individual situations?
Uh, I think the biggest tragedy, and this is a mistake that everybody has, and I've seen it in the vet space as much as the dental space, is the reason this is so hard for most docs to begin these conversations is because they don't have a framework. And so what they'll do is you'll come to me and you're a dentist and I'm a dentist. And so, well, obviously I want 50%. There's this level of, with respect, ignorance that younger docs will show up and assume, hey, I'm a doc, you're a doc. I can be an owner as well, as if being a dentist is an entrepreneurial qualification. It is as much an entrepreneurial qualification as I am qualified to be a dentist simply because I have teeth in my head. This is preposterous. But we have a hard time conveying this without leaving that doc feeling disrespected. There's better ways to do this. It's a misunderstanding. Having said that, to come more specifically to that scenario, uh, individuals' choices are kind of, as I mentioned, they can go out and do it themselves. There's no shortage of mentors and individuals' podcasts that can maybe fall time for them, or and then they ask themselves what results are they likely to create on their own versus, say, showing up for some of the docs on this call's practice. I believe that there is, if you're on this call, if you can hear my voice, you are a gold mine of wisdom. You are, if you're anything like me, beset with the scar tissue that only practice ownership can give you. There is an opportunity for you to weaponize and monetize that wisdom in house in a way that you grow other rock stars in your enterprise. And individuals like this might be the perfect candidate. I would advocate for associates like this to go and spend a year or two with some of our friends on this call, and at least those that have this kind of a partnership solution, because it's essentially you could own 100% of a $2 million practice in 5 years, let's say, or whatever, or you can own 25% of a $10 million practice in 3 years. This is a very different profile, and this is the value of folding time. Wisdom collapsed into consumable bite-sized chunks that harnesses their ambition with your wisdom. That's what I'm a fan of.
Okay. So another question here. I know that when people take your course that you are recommending, the program, you had mentioned during the webinar that you'll certainly be able to assist them on whether it makes sense to providing equity or not. What about the actual percentage or the amount of equity? Because I think for a lot of people, they're just kind of throwing darts at a dartboard. Will they be able to figure out, yes, I'm going to provide equity and be able to actually come up with a number?
Yeah, this is a combination of math, growth potential, and legacy. So the math of my current circumstances, which the Delta slider will do for them, as I say, we'll send it out to everybody. Growth, am I looking to transition out, or am I harnessing someone's ambition for us to move this practice to another level? You can see we start structuring things differently. Or so am I taking this person on to stay like this for a while, to buy some time, and have them load share a little? Am I bringing them on to harness the opportunity for growth? Or am I phasing out? Am I in a phase transition out? That will dictate the initial buy-in. I'm not a fan of just a one-time buy-in. I'm a fan of a sequential kind of tranches of buy-ins, and that will dictate the percentage, the duration, and the price. So what we'll do together, those should anyone choose to join me on this journey, anyone else, we'll talk about these factors, but the math underneath will support that. And so I get to look at it and say, I'm planning on leaving in 5 years. And we can see what it looks like to adjust the math for their buy-in, what it does to my income, but also my asset over time. Equally, to the growth point, is this an N of one, or is this an N of five partners that I want in the future? Many of the docs in my community have, as I alluded to, Dr. Christie, many practices, many associates, and in some cases, several partners. So it's also possible for those that are concerned. Yes, you can have a partner. This blueprint and structure that I teach not only makes it possible, but makes it easy for others to understand how you can have 5 associates and have 2 of them be partners, because qualification is available to everybody, but it's not for everyone. And the 4 avatars framework that we can also send out will help with that too.
Okay, I've only seen one additional question right now, but let's get to that. Um, what what about someone that's not sure if they actually need to do this? They're saying they're at a place where they're happy with their revenue, they've got 5 associates, a great team. Should they be thinking about partnership? And what's if they're in a good place? What's the benefit to them?
that's a beautiful place to be. For those individuals, which is where I am, for example, with my practices and my partners, the three of us started this enterprise together, and we're playing the long game. We have no need for partners. We've built, though both of my docs are, both of my partners are doing some clinical work, largely mentorship. I spoke about Dr. Tammy. We've replicated the same thing, in-house growth. This is a beautiful operation by the sounds of it. You've got 4 or 5 associates and everything's going great. Nobody's unhappy. What would it give you? Uh, Whenever we are, the economist, Dr. Thomas Sowell, had 3 beautiful questions that will come up increasingly in our conversations going forward. 3 beautiful questions when we are thinking about change of any kind. And I give this to our audience. This is a beautiful, it's not mine, extremely intelligent economist. Some of you may know him. He said, whenever I'm considering change of policy, mandate, structure, in this case, associateship versus partnership, what are the 3 questions? The first is compared to what? Because to bring on a partner is to solve for something. And it is a relative comparison. So compared to what? Compared to staying with them as an associate, compared to possibly losing them, compared to what? The second is at what price? Now, this is where we make a mistake of thinking, oh, a dollar price, because how much? No, it's not that price. It is the brain damage price, the stress price, the amount of time, the cultural impact that they will have on my practice. These are costs. Clinical standards, reputation in the community, at what cost? First is compared to what, second is at what price or cost, and the third is on what evidence. On what evidence should I make this change? Should I make this person a partner? What evidence? This one is a little damning because we realize this is a wonderful associate, but they have no idea how to handle a reprimand of a fellow associate. They have no idea how to manage, payroll and a bad payroll cycle. They don't know about these things. So again, all of this speaks to qualifying them. But those are 3 questions I actively use with any changes that I make of any kind. Compared to what, at what price, and on what evidence. So I would not make any changes for this individual unless and until they're beginning to imagine a world where they are no longer an owner. That's probably the only reason, short of one of the associates putting up their hand and saying, kind of put me in, coach. I want a shot at this. If they are, those conversations will never be cheaper than now. Laying out the structure for qualification was best done early, instead of saying to somebody, wonderful, and they think it's going to be instant, but it's going to actually take them a year to get up to speed. So those are my thoughts there, Nate.
Okay. Well, as promised, we were going to get to all the questions, and we have gotten to all the questions. So anything you'd like to say before we wrap it up for the evening?
I would like to say something important, which is I do not want to convey by any stretch that I have everything figured out. The vast bulk of what I'll be teaching is born of my own shortcomings, my failures, my mistakes, the bad partner I was, the good partner I was, I've been a bad partner, I've had bad partners, I've been a good partner, I've got good partners. I've done many things wrong. And a lot of these things that I'll teach are dynamic and from the world of my experience. They also come obviously from completely outside of dentistry. I maintain that the concepts in here carry to multiple domains. The impact that these principles will make in all domains of your life are what my docs can speak to on that thing. And I'll say that these problems are my favorite. These are incredibly complex problems, and I love solving them. I love what I do and the people I get to do it for. And if this resonates for anyone, I'd love to make a difference for them too.
Well, thank you for sharing your time and expertise. I thought this was fantastic material. I stay for all the webinars that I host and moderate, and some of them are not as entertaining as this, but I was glued, and I really appreciate your time. I'll talk to Jessica because I think we need to bring you back. I think this is really important information. I have a feeling, knowing what I know about you, that we just scratched the surface here in under an hour. So there's a lot of great content here.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for being here this evening and sharing your time and expertise. And as a final reminder, I know, as I said, some of you logged in a little bit late, but if you were here for half of the webinar or more, you will be sent a CE certificate. It's AGD PACE, so you can submit that to AGD, state dental societies. The recording should go out in a day or two. It's either going to come from me or from Alastair, one or the other, but keep an eye on your inbox for that as well. And as I said, we're going to try to bring him back sometime soon. So we know your time is valuable, and I thank all of you. As long as we continue to get hundreds of people showing up for these webinars, I'm going to keep doing it. I've done it since about 2015, and I love doing it, and we always seem to find great speakers, great content, and we'll continue to do that. So please stay safe and healthy out there, and we look forward to seeing all of you on our next webinar. Good night, everyone.